So we have in here a couple of already pre-built kits, a basic toiletry package, a standard toiletry package, and an executive toiletry package. I'll open up my side panel here to show you what each of these consist of. So this basic kit, think of something you might sell to a hotel that they're going to put in each of their rooms for every guest that stays. It might be a bottle of shampoo, a bottle of conditioner, a bottle of body wash, a bar of soap, and maybe body lotion. That's our basic kit. The standard kit contains those same items, plus a few more. It contains mouthwash, shower cap, shoe polish, cotton balls, Q-tips. The executive package will contain all of those and more. So we have shared components, again, across all of our kits here. They're all unique, but they share components. Additionally, we have some labor associated with each of these kits as well. So we're using these examples. I know that they're not perfect to your scenario, but they have sales history. So we're actually going to be able to forecast from them. So come over into my light manufacturing module. You can see it's built right into Acumatica, just like everything else. Head over to my production planning. We'll create new. And we're staring at a production planning form. So at the top of the form here, we're going to start to collect some necessary info. When is our planning period going to start? We're going to say today. And just for the sake of exercise, we're going to plan until this time next year. We can also dictate what our planning period size is going to be. We picked a length of a calendar year. We can break those periods up into 52 weekly periods, 12 monthly periods, or 4 quarterly periods. We're going to stick with monthly just because it's easy. We can also specify, once we've ran our forecast and we've gotten the projections for how many kits we're going to need to assemble for each period, we can still dictate how many of those work orders we want to generate. So we might be able to see a year down the road, but for whatever reason, we only want to generate enough for the next 3 months. Maybe the product life cycle only has 3 more months in it before it's replaced. We can dictate that here as well. But for now, we're going to leave it to 12 months to generate. We're going to choose our history source as sales. The reason I can choose between sales and manufacturing is you might have some kits that you don't sell. They only exist inside of other kits. And actually, I should just ask now, do you have any sub-assembly items inside of any of your kits?
No, we don't.
Oh, that's easy then. In the future, if you do, you'd be able to run your manufacturing history to be able to forecast into your future. For now, we'll just take a look at sales.
And then the other idea behind the sales was we recognize that when most companies take this tool, they haven't run any product through the tool. So we want to look at AR history of existing parts so that we have data that can be used for the statistical analysis to forecast into the future. So in this demo data set of these toiletry and beauty products, we actually built some history into the Acumatica sales demo database that allows us to do a demonstration like this. So we're pulling from sales history that we built.
There's a few other options. Thank you, Jim. There's a few other options we can capture information about. But at this point, we're just going to head down here. We're going to start adding the inventory items we want to forecast for. So I'm going to add my basic toiletry package. I'm going to select what revision it is. There's only one in here, which makes it easy. I'm going to choose my forecast method. I'm going to go with a linear regression, which is essentially a smoothing average. It's going to take our sales history and project it forward in a nice smoothing way. I do also have the option of manual, which we'll see if for whatever reason after we run our projections, if there's something you can account for that the system can't. Maybe you have a huge customer that you're onboarding. Maybe you're starting to do trade shows for the first time. Whatever the case may be. If you can anticipate some unexpected bump in sales, I could, after running the forecast, change this back to manual to actually edit the results if I needed to. But for the time being, just keep this as linear regression. And we'll save. I save more than I probably need to because I'm paranoid about my demo site fighting me back. We'll add our next item. And same thing, I'm going to select a revision here, choose my linear regression, and it's fighting back. While I'm fighting this, do you see the column that says substitute inventory ID?
Yeah.
We'll talk through that here as I go. Substitute inventory ID is really exactly what it sounds like. It allows us to run a new item. It allows us to project an item using a different item sales history. So if you had a product that was getting a product line upgrade and you were doing a one-for-one replacement of it, or even if it wasn't a one-for-one replacement, but you're introducing something similar enough that you expect to have similar sales to an existing product, I could take the sales history from that existing product and use that to generate future production orders for the new item. We're going to try to trick this. Use the substitutionary ID. Okay, there we go. So we're going to try to compare these two items side by side. We're going to specify what periods we want to generate and calculate. Okay. So I'm going to scroll to my right here so we can see all 12 months. You see we have a little bit better sales with our second kit than our first. We can see that as each month goes by, the projected sale amount is increasing, which means we must be trending in the right direction historically, and we're expecting to keep growing in that regard. Same thing for my first kit, going up incrementally each month. So we are, based on historical sales data, projecting growth. If I come over here to required materials, here it's consolidating those shared components. So we'll get into replenishment in a moment, but you can see that for these items that are common across both kits, the required material is going to be way higher than these items that are specific to a single kit. So I have my my two items here. I can kind of preview my required materials and what my required labor will be. And then if everything looks okay, I can go ahead and I can generate my work orders. Or before I do that, I could also view this as a report like other places in Acumatica. I can generate a nice clean PDF. Might need to adjust these columns so I can see a little bit better. But I could generate a report and distribute it internally as needed in case I need any more feedback before generating these work orders. Everything making sense so far before we actually generate the work orders and see what those look like themselves? Does this look like it would encapsulate all of your forecasting needs? Taylor, you're muted if you're talking to us.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was. Maybe with that substitute inventory ID, because I can see that maybe benefiting when we have like a new collection coming out, if we want to compare like palettes to palettes, lipsticks to lipsticks. I could see using that.
So then just a couple of other notes. Currently, we took 2 years past history, we applied a forecast model, and we said, okay, if everything is the same and you have the same purchase pattern, what's the next 12 months are going to be? You might say, hey, we think that relative to the pattern in the last couple of years, we're actually going to up it another 5%. So you have the ability to, in your mind, add or subtract from the profile in the past. So I have some makeup that I had for like the last 6 months, and it has this profile. If it continues this profile, this is what I'm going to sell. Well, now I'm going to substitute that makeup palette with this makeup palette of a similar ilk, but because of recent recent experience, say among my customer / fan base, I think probably sales are going to go up about 10%. Then put the 10% added in it, and it will blow this out. And then where we're going with this is when we generate the work order, we appreciate that Jeffrey doesn't manufacture, but the work order will generate a material requirements plan that will then say, okay, to meet this forecast, here's the amount of product that we will have to purchase. And that can include underlying items like the actual packaging for the makeup palette or the tubing for lipsticks. And if you purchase those on behalf of your vendors, you'll be able to run the product, and it will allow you to determine what your cost is going to be to place these orders against this forecast. So that's kind of the upper level thought process behind the forecast and how it translates into allowing one to do an analysis of what their spend will be on either the purchase for the finished good, because the work order could say, oh, this is a finished good, and I buy it versus make it, or the purchase of the actual components that go into the finished good if you purchase those components on behalf of your manufacturer. Yeah, so this would provide a way not to make the decision, but as a data point, right? All things being equal, new product, this is what we sold last year. We up at 5%, we down at 10%. This is what it would be going forward for the next 12 months. And if we go with that plan, this is how much we'll have to buy in either finished goods and or raw material in support of those finished goods. So that would be the benefit to management making decisions.
Great.
So let's see the process, please, Jake.
Yeah. So once management has put their heads together and determined that this is an appropriate amount for us to inventory, we can go ahead and we can generate our work orders from this screen. And don't be thrown off by the usage of words like work orders or manufacturing or even assembly. If Jeffree Star doesn't consider themselves to be manufacturers in any traditional sense, processing the work orders can be as hands-off or as hands-on as you need it to be. If all you're going to use it for is just to forecast inventory and then use it as a purchasing tool, that's totally viable. But we're going to go through the whole process and just know that it doesn't have to be, you wouldn't have to use it identically to how we're showing it. This is what our generic inquiry of the now manufactured work order, the now produced work orders look like. So when we see that month by month, we have a new requirement for the second kit until the date that we specified it as. Same thing with the basic toiletry kit as well. Every month we have a new amount that we're going to have to manufacture in order for us to meet the projected sales. And I'll open one of these up so we can see what they look like. Within this production order, you can see all the details that we'll need to complete the production order, the plan date, the planned quantity, the necessary components to meet this planned quantity. In this example, it's all a 1-to-1 ratio, but it could be 2-to-1, 3-to-1, as complex as you need it to be. And we'll also be able to still see the necessary labor to complete this work order as well.
And Jake, would you go do the slider bar to the right on the materials detail? Right, so it tells you the items, the locations. There's also a tab that tells you whether it's a make or a buy. So you can make them all buy, to your point about don't get concerned about the terminology for work order, etc. Because you can see there, you've got the vendor. So that's who you buy from, and that can be the finished good and or the component itself. That's the point.
Yep. We can see for each of these items down here at the bottom, this first item, we don't have any on hand. Second item, we have some on hand, but less than that available, which will probably not be enough to fulfill this order. And the next three, we have an outrageous quantity on hand. So we'll do this in a bulk process, but just to give you an idea of what will actually happen in the next stage, we can check inventory and know immediately how we're going to be able to fulfill what's required for this work order. In order for us to build 1,400 of this kit, we're going to need to purchase all of these items. We'll need to purchase the difference of what we have in stock and the total amount needed. And the remaining three, we already know that we have inventory on hand to complete.
Right, so that we think that this is one of the strengths of the product here, because it gives you visibility to the components below the finished good.
Absolutely. And ditto, again, it doesn't sound like anything you have requires sub-assembly, but at this stage too, if that would have been required, it would say inventory / production, or just inventory if it was already on hand. So whatever information you need to bring this to completion, it's going to be available at this screen. This is a separate kit for a different company that makes a construction dump cart. So very different than what you do. But the point is that this larger kit, which could be one of those mystery packs you're describing, within it could have another item that requires assembly itself. It's going to be listed here. The sub-assembly item will be associated with it. We're going to be able to continue to roll up costs so we actually know what these jobs are costing us. But I believe, even more so than doing that at the individual level like we've been looking at, I think another strength of the software is to be able to view all of your required materials across all of your open work orders. Here, I don't know why you might have those still on hold, but we have some examples here. The production requirement screen will pull in all my open production orders, or even planned or on hold production orders, and give me a consolidated view into the materials that's going to be required across all of them. So especially if you have any products that share common components, this is where we're going to be able to get a consolidated view into all of them. Even if that would have been across 3 different forecasts like we had looked at. So regardless of what forecasting plan it had been a part of, we could consolidate it here into this requirements report. And similarly to before, we can go ahead and just skip into processing all, but this shows a little bit better on a PDF format. For each of the inventory items required for each of these individual work orders, we can see what's going to be required to fulfill that work order and how many we actually have on hand we can allocate to it. So for this first inventory item, we need 5 for the first work order. That's fine, we have 5 on hand. We need 5 for the next work order. That's fine, we have another 5 on hand. But for the third work order, we need 100, and we only have 10 total, so we're going to have to purchase 100, which we can see down here. So it's consolidating the actual need across all of my work orders and giving me a purchase recommendation.
And if you notice in the third or fourth column over where it says work order status, released and planned, there's various status in this work order. In your case, think purchase order commit process. So you can keep everything in planning phases and run scenarios to your heart delight. You're not going to affect the software in any way. You're not committing anything. So this is really a way for a forecasting manager, a manager to run in and look at the system and run scenarios without any commitments to the system. Once you release it, that means you're cutting a PO and you're committing dollars on the company's part. But you've got actually, here we're showing plan. You actually have a planning phase also, which is just your kind of initial, if you will, master scheduling / forecasting process. And then when on plan, you can say, all right, let's go take a look and see how much inventory we have on stock already on hand. So then I can run this MRP engine and say, okay, if I want to do this plan for the next 6 months, that means someone's going to have to write a check for $4,355,212, right? That kind of thing.
Right. To Jim's point, we can truncate it down by what's planned, what's already released. Because this is built on Acumatica, we can use all of the same automation tools that are common throughout all the other processing screens. So I can set up an automation schedule here to say everything that's in a new status of released, maybe it's going to run once a day or once a week or every 5 minutes for all that matters. But I can also continue to break that down using some of these scheduled dates. So if I'm looking at a queue of work orders that extend into early 2024, I can go ahead and purchase everything I'm going to need for the next calendar year at one time. It's going to be a huge blow to our budget, but maybe we'll qualify for a nice bulk discount from the vendor. Or I could set a schedule that says to process, those that are due within the next 30 days, the next 60 days, whatever the case may be. So I can process all manually, or I can set an automation schedule to run as broadly or narrowly as I want to define those parameters. I could also not, my third option would be to not process from this screen at all. I could even just take my requirements report, and if I really want it to be hands-on and generate purchase orders by key entering them, or take advantage of things like Acumatica's blanket order functionality to dictate on a month-by-month basis how many I'm actually going to be sending to the vendor. Maybe I can use the total sum that I know I'm going to need over the next calendar year to negotiate a break discount from the vendor, but I'm still not going to be paying for it all up front at one time. So you have everything you need to see in one place, but how you want to manage that data is going to be completely up to you. Whether you want to purchase it all up front and have it out of sight, out of mind, or if you really want to protect your cash flow and get really specific with that automation scheduling as well. And then it might go without saying, but if I were to process all, it's going to consolidate all of those required materials by the vendor, just like you would expect in any of the other purchasing processing screens. It's going to consolidate by vendor.
And then to add on a bit to that, this is fully integrated with Acumatica's inventory, purchasing, and replenishment logic. So I keep going back to the tubes in the lipstick, but let's say as an example, you already have placed a blanket order and your vendors are going to get on a blanket order 10,000 tubes a month or 5,000, whatever the number is. When we run this plan into the future, we look at the replenishment logic and let's say the plan calls for 1,000 a month, and you already have a blanket order delivering 1,000 a month, it's going to net out and say, okay, you don't need to buy any, because it's going to know that in the supply chain and allocations and replenishment logic of Acumatica, that in this case component is already accounted for purchase orders that have been placed, or if you want POs that have been planned, you can use the allocation logic in Acumatica. So that's the idea there.
Absolutely. So that is sort of the whole process for generating these work orders and assembling these kits from a forecasting perspective. It is also possible to generate those work orders and subsequent purchase orders, whatever may be needed, on a sales order basis. That's a little bit less common, but a common use case for that would be, even if you had some on hand, if you had an order for a distributor of yours come in, and you might be able to fulfill their order with what you have on hand, but it's going to completely diminish your inventory and then send you into a status of back order for every order that comes in after it. I could sell it at sales order basis, say, this one's going to be marked for production, and we're going to generate work orders and build new kits specifically for this order just to protect your remaining inventory. So it is absolutely possible to do this from a sales order as well. And we can walk through that if you'd like to see it, or if you have any questions about it. But from what Jim had told me about Jeffree Star, it seemed like the bigger need was being able to do this from a forecasting perspective.
But on the sales order side, an example might be on the killer side, and you probably wouldn't do it on a sales order, but you could, where you have an event that's going to occur in the month of August, and someone's going to go on the show, and so you want to order items specifically because you're going to get into the business where you're going to deliver products to the show, and using the show event itself and the kiosks or whatever are at the show. So you want to make sure you have enough product at the show. You could tie an event directly and use either the work order or a sales order to generate all of the items and components for a specific activity. That's another way of looking at it.
I should have also shown, I guess I didn't ask, are your warehouse facilities now barcoded?
Yes.
They are. So again, depending on whatever your current workflows are, each of these work orders, we can also produce a nice clean production order sheet as well. That's barcode scannable to consume materials and time as well, if there's time and labor associated with the sales order. So even if you're, I know not every warehouse employee is probably walking around with a computer and a monitor so that they can view whatever their upcoming tasks are. So you could also print and distribute these work order forms as well that would have all the instructions related to the work order. Yeah. Any questions about any of those processes? The forecasting, the kit assembly, the requirements planning,